So today we have a fantastic panel on leadership first, and you can't get better than the three leaders that we have today for this panel. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Liz Hughes, who's Chief Executive Officer of NIDA. And we also have Professor Renée Leon, Vice-Chancellor of Charles Sturt University, and Professor Colin Stirling, Vice-Chancellor of Flinders University. So what we've done, we're going to ask the panel to reflect on the topic, which is leadership as we emerge from a post-pandemic world. And I've left it up to them to talk about their own reflections on the journey that we've been through, whether it's ended, what they learnt from it, how they managed it as leaders. And we've got three super different institutions and experiences to draw from, and then we'll have a little reflection on the panel and then go over to you, both here in the audience and online. So I've got my online open. If you'd like to put some chat in and reflections, that would be brilliant. So who wants to go first? Liz does. I just saw that look. Over to you, Liz.
Hi everyone, nice to be in a conversation with you. So I think it's probably just quickly worth talking about what we did during the pandemic, so that I can then actually sort of connect to the question about leadership. So NIDA, as you probably know, we train many actors, but we also train many other disciplines as well, including directors, designers, costume makers, scenic construction, specialist makeup, etc., etc. So a big part of our learning is putting on big productions that take up about 2/3 of the school work on these productions, and they have embedded in them learning outcomes. So when the pandemic happened, we were looking at our productions in June, and we had 6 fully staged productions planned. You know, everyone's very excited, been working towards them for quite some time. And suddenly we went, there's no way we can do that during the pandemic. So we basically talked to and worked alongside the students and just said, okay, well, we've got 2 options here. Either we decide to basically just, down tools, wait to see what happens and, do them at some point in the future. Who knows how long this thing will last for. Or we actually opt to kind of lean into the adversity and kind of invent the future of the performing arts sort of sector. So that's what the students chose to do. And we put on we actually collaborated very integrally with the industry, with our colleagues globally, and we gave out a new brief in terms of coming up with productions that could be done totally virtually, that were really engaging, and that were going to provide the learning outcomes for the students. And that went really well, actually. It went extremely well. And in fact, I think it was a moment where we had a lot of calls when we actually launched this digital festival saying, how on earth did you do that? How did you pull that off? And when I reflect on, I suppose, the things that I think about in terms of the advantages of having led into that adversity, it was really going to the DNA of our training, which, performance training is about improvisation. It's about connecting with audiences, either linear or non-linear. And it's about kind of slapping it all together and getting the show on the road no matter what. So, and very much about entrepreneurism, agility, etc. So in a way, our students had the superpowers that were kind of, ready to be leveraged if we had the imagination to go well in that circumstance. So in terms of leadership, I would say leveraging those superpowers of creativity. We're talking about soft skills quite a lot. I think they are some of the superpower skills that we all need. It was about collaboration with students and actually literally working through the problems with the students so that, they would come up with most of the solutions. They would come up with most of the ideas. We had to create the space for those students. And I think it was also about acknowledging that within disruption is a fantastic opportunity. And if you lean into the opportunity, you can really make a difference and really shift the world. The world is going to continue to be messy. It's going to continue to not be like it was before. So I think it's important not to be complacent and to really move forward, grab the opportunities and invent the future. And the students, especially creative students, are going to be the co-creators, co-designers of that future.
Fantastic reflection. I just want to ask you a question though before you go. How did you find it personally? You've come into this new role. What was it like for you?
So I think when you come into a new role, you have to listen, and you have to listen to what everyone says. And you do that very actively. But I also very much recognised that the key people that I needed to listen to were about 360 full-time students, and ask them what they thought we should do. So I think that in that first year, I did feel a little bit like the group psychologist with no training. I had massive imposter syndrome, but I did feel that a lot of my job was to help people navigate emotions and to think about, look for the positive. In a way, park all of those things were going to be redundant in this environment, such as complacent thinking, such as negative attitudes, such as wishing that there was a world that we weren't in. So I felt like I was, in a way, the group psychologist. I employed quite a few psychologists during that time as well, various skill sets within that psychology skill set. But look, it was both thrilling, exhausting, but also really inspiring to see what the students did, and the staff, and the industry, and all of our partners, of which there were many.
Excellent, thank you so much. I might go to you, Renée.
Thanks, Claire. Well, I came into Charles Sturt University when we were already a year and a bit into the pandemic, so the first huge shock had already been digested. But also, unusually for a Vice-Chancellor, I came in from outside the higher education sector. So I came from the leadership of other large and complex organisations, and I approached the challenge of leading a university through and hopefully out of the pandemic as one to which I brought that leadership capability and leadership lens. And we all hopefully won't talk about the same things, but I'll only say briefly about the student piece, because I'm sure there's much more to say about that during this whole conference, which was that Charles Sturt already had a very significant online presence, and so in many ways for us to pivot everything to online, people did an amazing job of doing that pretty quickly and seamlessly. Not that it was without enormous effort and inspiration and collaboration by the staff to make that happen instantly and seamlessly, and I'm sure that view will be shared across many universities. But the thing that I wanted to talk the most about is about the leadership of the staff of the organisation and the creation of the right culture in which you can have fit for future organisations. So when I came into higher ed, people told me that I would find it was a pretty change-resistant sector. I'm sure no one in this room recognises that, but you know, I came from the public service where we're used to doing change whenever you get a new minister or whenever your department gets amalgamated with another and you get a new policy, change is a constant. And in one of my first town halls at Charles Sturt, one of the staff asked me to make a promise that there wouldn't be any more change this year. So that suggestion I'd been given that academia was a bit change resistant had some roots to it. But of course what happened in the pandemic was that universities demonstrated amazing change capability. Universities turned on a dime, created online learning, working from home, Zoom collaborations, the whole box and dice of change, and did it really well. I know the quilt scores we saw this morning saw that there'd been a dive in learner engagement, but there hasn't really been a dive in graduate outcomes, there hasn't been a dive in the quality of the skills that students learn. And so universities have obviously done an amazing job of doing change and doing it pretty well. But what I see now is, across the sector, a lot of people who are really tired and who also, many of them feel that change was done, as it sort of has to be in an emergency, in a rush, and not necessarily with the kind of lead up to and involvement of staff in the developing of change ideas. It had to be just done, sometimes done to people. And what I think is important for leaders in universities going forward is to both celebrate the capability that the sector obviously does have to do change, notwithstanding its reputation as being change averse, but demonstrate really actively to staff that you can do change well and that you can do it in a way that's engaging and inspiring and that people want to go to, rather than feel that they've just been made to do it and they didn't like it. And for us to be an agile, adaptable, sector going forward, we need that change muscle to be really well developed, that leaders in the institution know how to lead change and people know how to participate in it. And then probably the third thing I'd say is just about the title of being a post-pandemic world. So, of course, it's not post-pandemic at all. I know hardly anyone in this room is wearing a mask, but we all should be, really. I'm not, because we're talking, but the pandemic is still very much with us, and we're kidding ourselves if we think that we can just go back to how things were, or even that everyone wants to go back to how things were. Many staff actually really love that whole working from home thing, and actually, thanks, they'd like to keep doing that. And as one of the student presenters said this morning, 70% of students want at least the option of going online for their studies now that they know we can do it. So we have to think about the things we've learned in the pandemic, both what went well and what didn't, and how much of that is going to continue going forward. And if we keep getting successive waves of either coronavirus or something else, then that desire we've all got to get our staff and our students back on campuses just might keep getting kiboshed. And we'll have to think about, how do we make this sustainable? Not that this is just an emergency that everyone's giving their all to and in the end it'll be okay, but how do we make this level of pivoting and flexing and hybriding and so on a sustainable business going forward? And the only way we're going to do that effectively is by co-designing that future with our staff and our students, not just doing it to them.
Thanks so much, Renée. And there's a comment online, actually. I worked under Renée in the public service and her leadership is inspiring. So, Colin and Liz, you need to get your people on the platform and starting comments. But thank you so much. And I'm now going to go to you, Colin, for your reflections.
Thank you, Claire. And, I would completely echo, I think, the comments that we've heard already, so I'll try not to repeat those. Part of my thinking, though, around the pandemic is that, I don't think it necessarily has changed. In fact, I don't know why I added necessarily. I don't think it has changed where the sector is headed. I think it has dramatically accelerated where we were already heading toward. The move towards increasingly hybrid opportunities for learning has been underway for a very long time. The move, of course, as Renée mentioned, to entirely some online programs, some entirely online programs has been underway for a very long time. It's been, as long as I've been in the sector, we've been talking about that increasing move towards digital content. What we saw, though, in the pandemic was this rapid acceleration towards it. So people who had not necessarily resisted, but maybe not even been interested, but for whatever reason hadn't yet done it, suddenly were asked to do it. And I got to say, my colleagues at Flinders were just amazing. When the decision was made that we would shift to online, we moved everything online within a week. And to some very positive feedback from students, thankfully, for that, all of that effort. It was a huge amount of effort. And having made that change now, I don't see us moving backward from there in the future. I think that will simply be something that we continue as we go forward. From the overall leadership perspective, I would just mention students as well, because in South Australia, we had a slightly different pandemic experience, certainly to Victoria and to New South Wales. But nonetheless, we had some shorter lockdowns. But we also had a lot of regulation, especially in the health industry, a lot of staff shortages and so forth. And I got to say, throughout that entire process, all of my colleagues and the students that we have in the medical and the health-related professions were phenomenal. We managed to keep all of our medical student placements going throughout the pandemic. All of our nursing, all of our social work, all of our other allied health placements all ran through the pandemic. When we had changes in regulations in aged care facilities that meant that casual staff couldn't teach in more than one, in any 2-week period. That basically led to the threat of closing down aged care facilities, and nursing students from Flinders then filled so many of those posts that enabled those facilities to keep running through the pandemic. So we had very committed students, frankly, in the front line of COVID healthcare. And it made a huge difference because, of course, it also meant that the more seasoned professionals were then freed up to do some of the other important work that they had to do. So there was a huge commitment to just making sure that everything kept going. And I thought that that was a tremendous effort from everyone involved. Now, the one thing I would perhaps say that, you know, what have we learned through it all? I mean, one thing that strikes me is I've met leaders in other institutions or in other places, shall we say, that often perhaps portray the persona of having to always be the smartest person in the room, having to have all the answers, having to always make the perfect decisions. I've never been of that particular persuasion myself. I've always preferred to be able to have a well-formed but perhaps imperfect plan that makes progress, rather than spending lots and lots of time developing the perfect plan that might never see the light of day. Now, in COVID, I think what we all experienced was the importance actually of that principle, I think, because we were presented with a subset of information. None of us knew which parts of it were right or wrong, or what the future was going to look like around vaccinations and incubation times and all sorts of stuff. But we had to act, and so we did. So we made decisions. We knew that they may not turn out to be the right decision, but we knew we had to make a decision, because otherwise the wheels would have fallen off. No one would have been able to come to work, and we wouldn't have been able to keep our educational programs running. And so we made those decisions, knowing that we didn't know everything. And what we then did was to just monitor. And of course, if it looked like it was working, well, we doubled down. And if it looked like it wasn't working, well, guess what? We changed it. And it seems to me that it's the epitome of an agile, versatile organization. That's the way that if you think you can ever design a perfect plan, you're wrong. If you wait to do it, you're too late. What you should do is develop a nearly perfect plan, a pretty good one, and act and implement. And I think that what we'll see is institutions, as we move forward, doing a little bit more and more and more of that. And I think I've always been impatient with the pace at which universities implement things. I always find it sometimes, some universities, not all universities, but I sometimes find we're a bit plodding. We think we might do a curriculum innovation, but maybe not next year. We'll wait until the following intake, and then it's another 3 years before the whole thing's rolled out. And by which time, my kids have grown up, and you don't even know if the change you've implemented is relevant anymore. So don't think of it as a perfect plan. Think of it as the best possible thing to do today.
Fantastic reflection. So all three of you sort of touched on a topic around the sector and its resistance to change, or its ability to adapt to changing circumstances. And I'd love you to just talk about the sorts of aspects that you've retained from the experience. And Liz, I'm quite interested from your experiences to start with around, did you look at what you did in that time and go, these are good things I can pick up, or did you immediately go back? And I'd love all of our speakers to reflect on the sorts of things that have actually changed as a result of the experiences we went through.
A big focus of the team was enabling us to keep going and using their creative DNA, actually, and coming up with solutions. As soon as the pandemic looked like it was subsiding, I think we were the first organisation to have 7 fully staged productions pretty at the same time in the world, at the beginning of October, including a musical with a live orchestra, because the passion and the drive to create and to put on excellent productions was so strong from the whole community. That was fantastic, but the challenge was that there was a whole bunch of fantastic innovation that happened to enable us to put on this digital theatre festival. So I was very keen, as a number of people were, to retain that sort of really push the boundaries of storytelling through uses of new technology, reimagine what the whole experiences could be for audiences. So that was something that was really exciting. And many people agreed, but then were so married to the more, slightly more traditional experiences that there was that tension. So I tried a few things. So I was like, okay, rock and roll. We've got some money. We've got a little bit of money from a donor. We're just going to put that towards, technological sort of storytelling that pushes the boundaries of with technology. So I was like, okay, I got 4 alumni who literally graduated just after the pandemic and said, here's a brief, here's $2,000 each, come back and tell us what we should do. And they had lots of great ideas, and I brought them in to talk to the staff and students. And then we put some dedicated money for people to basically take the money and experiment. The challenge was, of course, that we're all recovering from COVID. And even though there was an interest in that area, it was very hard to do. Some people did actually do that. So we've incorporated things like motion capture in our training, just stuff that, was pretty straightforward, but also really important. And then I also, but I didn't get the sort of take-up that I was sort of wanting, even though the enthusiasm was there. So then we basically reconfigured that opportunity into a thing called NIDA X, which we basically engaged with the alumni network and said, here's some seed money, here's the brief, invent the future. And they're kind of doing that now, which is great. So I think technological innovation, engaging very closely with staff and students and getting rid of hierarchy, which often is the kind of, it's the barrier for innovation. So making sure that every voice leadership is everywhere, right? So it's in students, it's in the team members. It doesn't matter what level they are within the hierarchy. It's important to give everyone a voice and to let the best ideas come forward. So kind of getting rid of some of those structures as well. And also I think seeking collaborations with non-art sectors as well as part of our training as well.
Fantastic. Any other thoughts?
Well, I'd have to say that for Charles Sturt, and I'm sure this is true for many universities, although the initial onset of the pandemic was incredibly painful and stressful, like many disruptions, it actually did lead to some really important self-examination about where were we placed and how were we going. And although much of this was painful to go through, Charles Sturt's come out of the pandemic actually with a whole new strategy, a whole new commitment to much greater focus on research, much greater international and national partnerships, because they weren't directly driven by the pandemic, but the impact that the pandemic had on the whole organisation just forced us to have a whole fresh look at ourselves and how we were placed and where we were going. And it actually means that we've got a much more exciting future direction than just steady as she goes, which is sort of how we were before. So it was painful. Lots of it perhaps wasn't the best change management in the world. I'm trying to, now get more love back into the change management process, but it has really set us up for a much more attentive approach to, so what's the future like and where should we be in it, which you shouldn't need a global pandemic to have that conversation, but that's what precipitated it for us. And then the other thing that I want to say that is a great thing about the pandemic, which I hope we will all keep, is that we all saw more of each other's lives, because there were people's dogs and children and everything on the screen with them, and people were just in their normal clothes, not in their work uniform, and people were able to be just a bit more vulnerable and real with each other, and managers had to actually see that and respond to it in ways that perhaps they always should have, but didn't always do. And I hope that we, like all organisations, will remember to keep that knowledge that our people have lives and that we need to make work and their lives work together for them to be able to be their best at work.
Thanks, Renee. That's awesome. I know I had a lot of moments online where it's like, oh my goodness, you do not believe what's happening in front of me right now. Colin, straight back to 2019 and before for you at Flinders, or did you learn things from the period of time?
I mean, maybe I'll just pick up on that empathy theme, because I think, being able to empathise with the people in your organisation is a very important part, I think, of being a leader. If you don't understand the sort of hopes and fears, if you like, of your staff and your students, then I think your capacity to touch them, with vision and with a description of the future, I think is more difficult. So you always want to try and do it. So I think that's been something that I think has come, has again been amplified. I don't think so. I don't think it's changed. It's just amplified the importance, because our staff and students have spent some time online, so they're no longer in the familiar surroundings where you think what's going on. But anyone who's ever found themselves having a quiet conversation with a staff member, you can quite quickly realise that there's something behind the smile that maybe needs some attention or needs some support. So I think empathy for staff is a very important. Staff and students is a really important thing. During the pandemic, we were fortunate. What we did in the initial stages was to talk to staff and emphasise that, look, we're in a good place at the moment. Good student numbers at the minute. What we've got to do is to keep those students, make sure that they don't drop out, that they can continue with their studies, that we can retain the international students that have come, that we can attract more into the future. And if we can do that, then financially we'll be able to weather this storm, as easily as possible. And the staff were amazing. In 2020, Flinders is a small university. Our annual revenue is 550 million or so. In 2020, we missed our revenue target by $100,000. I mean, that's an accounting error. That's nothing. So we were able to say to staff, look, we're doing fine. We're doing well financially, and there's no need for us to contemplate any restructures. And I think we've got to recognise that a lot of people in this room, a lot of people around the sector have lost colleagues during the pandemic, because a lot of universities have run restructures, have run redundancy programs and so forth, and because they've had to. We were fortunate at Flinders, we didn't have to, we still haven't. We haven't run any redundancy programs as a consequence of COVID. So we were able to say to staff, look, we think we're in a strong enough place that we can build on this experience for the future. And I think that if you can offer that the vision, if you can offer that the idea that we're heading towards something that's perhaps unexpected, perhaps a little bit unknown and therefore a little bit scary, at least we're all still going to be doing it together. And you can harness enormous energy from doing that. And from the student perspective, I think that I was really proud of the response that we had at Flinders, because, of course, one of the groups that, to my mind, was diabolically forgotten by the previous government were the international students who were onshore. They were offered no support at all. And of course, we all were thinking, we were all thinking about the students who were locked overseas, couldn't come back to complete their studies. That was something that all of us in the sector endeavoured to reverse as quickly as possible. I get, it irks me when folks say, well, you only care about them for the money. Nonsense. We had medical students who had done 3 years of medicine with us and were stuck overseas and couldn't come back, So we managed to bring most of those back through the pandemic, actually, because they got special dispensation visas. And we managed to complete them, and they could then go off on with the rest of their lives. But for the students who were stuck here, we had food. What do you call it? food banks. It was awful. And so we, at the university, we established a support fund. We got some support from the South Australian state government, none from the federal government. We also then raised money in the university by a fundraising campaign, and I was delighted. We had the largest ever response to any such fundraising initiative in the university, with the largest number ever of staff who then donated some of their own money towards this fund that was going to provide for scholarships for our students and students in distress, and chiefly international students in distress. And I thought that was, it spoke volumes for the extent to which staff in a university actually really care about the students that they are teaching, and are willing to go that extra mile, not just in moving all their teaching online, but also, donating to help those students get through what was a really tough time. And look, I think that, it speaks to the culture of the organisation, which I think is very strongly student-focused in a really positive way. And I think that understanding the things that your fellow human beings are going through is a really important part of life in general, but certainly leadership.
Thanks so much. I might turn over to you in the audience and also online if you'd like to put some questions. So we have a question. I think our mic runner's coming. Awesome. Cleaning the mic. For those online, we're cleaning the mic.
Hi. Yep, it's on. Liam McLaren, University of Tasmania, where I'm the president of the student union there. One thing about the nature of the student representatives is that our cycle is annual, and we're only in for a period of 12 months. Where when we communicate with university executives, the constant thing that will get thrown back at us is it's about strategy, it's about the long term, you've got to go away and work on this and then we'll come back with an answer. How do you believe, which obviously doesn't bode well with the nature of an annual cycle for student representatives, so how do you believe that student representatives can better communicate with executives so that outcomes can be addressed both in now but also the long-term future? I think
it's a great observation. And if I may, I would also say that student reps, they only have a year, but it takes a little bit of that of the first year. It takes a bit of time to just tune in, right? So in fact, the amount of productive time you get in the role is remarkably short. So I think it's a really fantastic observation. I mean, one thing that we did for precisely that reason, we have student reps on our university. It's called the University Council. That's the governing body of the university. So we've always had student reps on it. But we recently changed, we had the state government change our act, and as part of the new act, our student reps now sit for 2 years on council. And it's already made, a really obvious substantial difference, because rather than having effectively 6 months of, if you like, being able to contribute, it becomes 18. But that's, so I think that's just one observation. But I think your broader point is that, student representation isn't just on council. We have student reps in all sorts of different parts of the university. It's part of our Student Voice project. And I think that what we have to try to do is to just hear a little bit, to listen a little bit better, and to make sure that what we get, but feedback as concerns about the immediate experience, is something that is actually real and important to students today, and it's something that we need to then be able to act upon. So I think it's a great point that you raise.
I'm happy to make a few comments. So through the pandemic, we have a student representative council, and each particular discipline of study is represented. And we have a master's rep as well as a diploma rep, because we're vocational education and training and higher ed. So literally, myself and the president of the council during the pandemic, we were like texting and calling, and I didn't have time to actually change my mobile, so I was actually using my personal mobile. So they all had my mobile, I'll be frank. But it was literally, I relied on Isaac. He and I went and told everyone what was going on. He and I basically went, this is the strategy that I think we need to employ. What do you think? He would talk to the council. And then we basically went shoulder by shoulder and told people what the plan was during the pandemic. I did the first couple, and he was so articulate that I just went, well, you do it. And actually the students loved that because it was a student talking and enabling. And there were a lot of ups and downs. So what we ended up setting up was they wanted to meet at 8:30 every Thursday morning for half an hour on Zoom. So we did that every week. And they... The president basically organised all the discipline leaders to get information coming through. So that was set up. And then there were particular groups of people that, the BLM happened at that time. So I had a regular meeting with a number of students who were culturally diverse or First Nations or who wanted to tell me something. I think it's about being, for us, it's about being a bit flexible as well, because you need different things at different times. So what's set up at the moment is I'm not necessarily meeting every week, but the person in charge of learning and innovation is meeting them every week. And yeah, they often have great ideas, and that actually affects our curriculum. When we went through a branding exercise, it got much more interesting when half of the people in the room were students, hand-picked for their discipline knowledge in design and costume, etc. They actually helped us come up with our vision wording. And yeah, so I just think that kind of collaboration is really, really great and fun too, for people like me.
Excellent. We probably have time for one more question. It's gone so quickly. This one over here. One at the back.
I have
sorry.
the mic, so...
Go, yeah, sorry, I got the mic. You have to win.
So thanks very much for your insights. And in leadership, forums like this, we often hear about what you folks have done. I'd be really interested to know how you would like staff to follow. So it's a very different environment when you're at the top and you've come all the way up through the ranks presumably, and you know how different each of those perspectives looks. Now that you're at the top, how would you like people to listen to you, and how would you like your staff to most effectively communicate their needs to you?
What a great question. I'm just going to combine it with an online question, which was around academic fatigue as well. How do you manage when everyone's gone through such a hard time?
Well, I know we haven't got much time, so I'll try and be quick because everyone will have thoughts on this. So in my view, you can't get that to work well if there's a big distance between the people at the top and everyone who you're trying to have follow you. And so it does really depend on there being just great leadership communication at all levels, up and down in the organisation. And that's something that I'm certainly trying to build more of at Charles Sturt. And I think it's got particular challenges for academia, where people often are in academic leadership roles because of their technical expertise and their discipline knowledge, and haven't necessarily been invested in for their leadership capability. And so I think we can do that, and we must do that, because then what you want is that there's the opportunity for the people at the top to actually hear much better from people at all levels what's really going on for them, and for people at local leadership levels to actively involve their staff in the how we're going to achieve this strategic outcome. So the strategic outcome might be set at the top, but the details of what everyone's going to do have to have much more input from the people who are going to do the doing, because they have the ideas and they know what works and what doesn't. So, what I want from followers is both their input by way of innovation and the how, but also their willingness to put their ideas in pursuit of the strategy that the organisation's trying to pursue for the overall good of the organisation.
Okay. Someone else?
Going back to the question, there's sort of an assumption that leadership always comes from the top. And I would say that actually often I'm the one that's synthesising what everyone else is thinking. So there's a broad direction, but often the discipline a team that is, so for example, doing technical theatre and production. They will have a whole bunch of ideas and they will come forward and bring them up, and we'll have a discussion. So a lot of it is actually really ensuring everyone's got some agency and respecting that, I know X, but they know all these other things that, I'm never going to know. So, and they're the ones that have been on the ground teaching. So it's kind of, a lot of the time if I walk into a room, sometimes people think someone else is in charge, and that's fine, because guess what? They are in charge in that particular area.
And I guess I'd just add, I know Colin's got something to say as well, but on the academic fatigue thing, it's a subset of that overall question that I just expect that each school will work on that themselves with the leadership of the head of school and the active involvement of the staff about, well, how can we organise this workload so that we're not all working 60 hours a week?
And I think it's a really good question on leadership, and I always think of universities as being very much a command and control structure. I'm in command and they're in control. So there's no concept of simply, demanding that staff do such and such a thing, because it's not going to happen. So I agree with Renée. It's about empower. You stand back, you describe a vision, you share a vision, you have a vision that staff buy into, and you absolutely encourage staff. You empower staff to develop the how things are implemented, but also for me, the single most important question is why. So if something is going to be implemented, I think that our staff, they're all very clever human beings, and they can all process information, understand complex concepts uniformly. And the issue for me is always to try to describe or explain why something is important for the institution. And I learned that, in practical terms, many years ago from one of my academic mentors, the head of my school in my first academic position. And he was a genius at walking into a room full of people, describing a problem to us, explaining what the solution might look like, explaining why it was important to us. And, we'd all just leave and just get on with it. We all just felt, that it was clearly, it was an imposition that we had to do. It was a pain in the what, because we had to do it, and yet we understood why it was important, and we set about doing it. And I think that that leader. His name was Keith Gull at Manchester University. He was brilliant at mobilising people because he could explain to them why something was important. And I think it's what we should always aspire to try to do as much as we possibly can.
Fantastic. And do you know what? That's the end of the panel. I can't believe how fast we went, but thank you so much for amazing reflections and from the questions from the audience. And I'd like us to thank our panel, please. Thank you.